It was reminding you that in your heart there's an open light. And that is the life love that is seeking to be birthed. Not just once a year. So this beautiful light is what we get to share with each other. This beautiful light is how we get to recognize the love that is within each one of us. Now, whatever the actions or behavior might be, you may not think that is love, but it is. You may not recognize it as love, but it is. And that's how you get to have peace. That's how you get to rest in peace tonight. That's how you get to rest in peace every night. And since you have copies of this, you can share this with your family on Christmas Eve if you like. You can share this with your friends as you go about your business and your holidays, celebrations. And so I want to visit the liturgical aspects of this thing called Christmas, which is more Christ, which is more love, which is more oneness. And so what they say is, and remember that the Bible was written at least 40 years after Christ died, and not necessarily in the order in which you see them in the Bible. But the gospel that refers to some of the more details of the birthing of the Christ that was manifest in, through, and as Jesus said that a decree went out, an order went out. And this order required Mary and Joseph to move from one place to another in order to pay the price for being. They call it taxes. You know, there isn't any place you can be in a city, in a state, in a country where you don't have to pay taxes. It's one of those things that is simply required. And if you are occupying this space, and particularly if you own property, then you have to pay the price for being there. I know y'all don't want to be reminded of your taxes, but there it is. Now, Mary was just a young teenager. She was about 14. And Joseph was an older man. You know how these things are arranged. So that the man can have companionship and so that the young woman can have a security, particularly in those days. Now, because Joseph was from the house of David, the house of Bethlehem, which is the house of substance, they had to travel from Galilee to Bethlehem. And it was some 80 or 90 miles that they had to go on foot. Now, can you imagine yourself walking 80 or 90 miles on foot? Can you imagine yourself walking 80 or 90 miles wearing heavy cloth? Can you imagine yourself walking 80 or 90 miles on a donkey that is walking on a very rocky road, sometimes going up the hills and sometimes going down the hills for a period of maybe a week? Because in normal travel time, it might be at about 4 days, and they might be spending, 20 hours on the road per day. But she's like more than 8.5 months pregnant, okay? And she's carrying her load, and the donkey is carrying her, and Joseph presumably is walking and letting her ride the donkey. We would hope that's the truth of it. There was no pavement. And there weren't any palms placed under the donkey's feet like the last time that they said Jesus walked into Jerusalem. There was simply a long, hard journey to the birthing of the Christ. You see, the birthing was already in process. We talked about the biological aspects of that last week. We talked about the psychological aspects of coming into a Christ consciousness. And now we're looking at that outer journey that we're traveling on now as we seek to bring forth something new, as we seek to transform that old mindset, to leave those old ideas behind and to move into an awakened consciousness of what real oneness is, what real love is, what unconditional grace is about. And so now a new life energy was emerging, and so there was a shifting of the environment. They had to go because the census was going on, and there were a number of people traveling. Now in those days, because people didn't necessarily like to be traveling on their own, because there were thieves, even then. There were people who wanted to take from other people's stuff that didn't belong to them. And so they often traveled in caravans, lots of people traveling together. And in this journey, they were able to support each other in the process. So we're already dealing with this homeless state of being that these people are in, and the potential for violence that is surrounding them, even as Joseph was living in the highlands and returning back to the land of his ancestors who lived along the River Jordan. There was a dense forest, there was a flat land near the river, and so there were animals who occupied those forests. You know, bears and lions and boars. So there was also the possibility of these wild animals coming through as they're moving on this week-long journey. Now the River Jordan itself, metaphysically, is like a stream of thought. You know how your streams of thought are. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, sometimes they're just indifferent. And so that must have been some of the ways that Mary was being as she was on this rocky road. There must have been some kind of discomfort in Joseph's feet. There might have been moments where it wasn't all good, but they were committed to supporting his birth. They were committed to moving into a greater awareness, a greater obedience, a greater understanding of their oneness with God. And so they went on to Judea. And they had to cross Samaria. And you know, the Samaritans and the Jews didn't get along so much, even though they were part of the same religion. We don't see that at all nowadays. I wish that were true. So there was a consciousness of separation that they had to cross over. There was a consciousness of a so-called other that they had to transport across. That they had to cross over these sense concepts. They had to cross over this kind of turbulence. And so there was a way that these travelers had to carry their supplies. They had wineskins to carry the water, so there wasn't any drive-through where they had to pick up their food. They had to carry it with them. And so as they carried their food on this bumpy road, their breakfast might be dried bread. Their lunch might be oil on the bread. And their dinner might be herbs with oil and bread. And so this wasn't a fancy kind of existence. This wasn't a luxurious kind of buffet. This wasn't even a five-star restaurant kind of experience that was happening for this new birth to to come into fruition. There were probably sheep around. You know, sheep were generally around in those kinds of areas as they are today. And you know, sheep are like the innocents. They don't hurt anything. They don't hurt anybody. They don't have an agenda. They're pure. It's like a baby. Pure. So I love the analogy of the shepherds watching over the innocents. And I love the analogy of the wisdom, the wise men that bring the riches and the beauty and the eternality of spirit. These things were already in the possession of the Christ, but these outer representations of gold, frankincense, and myrrh were outer gifts to represent what was going on in this expansive life. And that this special presence had called them to this special place. They had recognized from the light of their being, and that was broadcast so that they could find their way energetically, vibrationally, so that they could meet up in this place. Well, Herod found out that these men had come. Word got around, you see, that they were there to see the newborn king. Word got around that that newborn king wasn't Herod, and he wanted to know what the devil was going on. He called them over to see them, have a conversation. And he told them that they better let him know where this child was, because he wasn't having it. You know how ego is. Nothing's going to come before you and your desires. Nothing's going to come between you and your material treasures. Nothing's going to come between you being first and foremost in the minds of everybody around you. We don't know any people like that. Or do we? They might even be ourselves from time to time. But even Herod was aware that love existed. Herod was aware, but he wasn't necessarily happy about it. So Herod is temporal. He's not going to last. Love is eternal. It's going to last. Now, Herod doesn't understand the law of our being is love. And so he was narrow, he was jealous, he was destructive. And he couldn't fulfill the law of love with this kind of consciousness. But down the way, in the middle of the fields where Mary and Joseph had nowhere to go. They didn't have relatives they could stay with. There were so many people coming, there wasn't room to fit them in. There wasn't any room at the end, as we've been told time and time. So what we have is the open universe, and to be able to live and to be in the presence of other animals. There's a dimension of us that is animus. But there were cows and sheep and, animals who were staying outdoors, and it was in their presence that they got to witness the birthing of this baby. We don't know anything about who the midwife was. We don't know what the doula was or who the doula was. We don't know. Particular details were not outlined in the stories. But there was a process here that was going on, and that's the development of our spiritual nature in the challenges that we go through, in those hard places where we find ourselves, on those rocky roads that we travel, in the highlights of our lives, in the high roads as well as in the low roads. We get to discover things about ourselves in the development of our spiritual nature, because we have chosen to come here at such a time as this to acquire the lessons for our soul. And so as we develop our spiritual nature, we're basically finding our inner light. We're basically finding that bright spot about us, our dharma, our purpose, our reason to be. We're coming to discover another dimension of love that we hadn't known in previous incarnations, in previous expressions, in our previous lives. And so we chose to come here to learn a new way of loving. We chose to come here not simply to seek things like flesh or food or houses or money. That's why we have to be like shepherds with our thinking. We have to watch our thoughts. Otherwise, we'll kill the Christ child that is seeking to be birthed in each one of us. We have to watch our thoughts. When we start to think that we're better than another person, we have to watch our thoughts. When we decide that we want to judge another person, we have to watch our thoughts, because in essence, we are them and they are us. And because we have called each of them into our experience, we have requested a lesson to be learned through their own awakening, of their development, of their spirit. And so as we come together, we have to take care of this innocent new idea that's seeking to be birthed. We have to take care of this precious sheep. We have to take care of it. We have to nurture it. We have to hide it in some cases. We have to be willing to hold our innocence. We have to be willing to nurture our innocence and not be so jaded by what has happened before, not expecting any more than the same lack experiences that we have been experiencing over and over again, being so skeptical that we can't even remember how to believe again. We can't even remember how to vision again. We can't even remember how to see possibility again. So we need the wise men to come from the east. That part of us that is our intuition, we need to tap into that knowingness. We need to tap into that light that is guiding and directing us to lands that we haven't been in, to new territories of our lives. Sometimes we have to move from place to place in order to be able to land in that perfect spot for something new to be birthed. It's happening with us as individuals. It's happening with us as this spiritual community. It's happening with us in our relationships. Something new is seeking to be birthed. You may look back over this year 2013 and you may have certain concepts about what didn't happen. You may have certain concepts about what you were able to achieve. You may have certain concepts about the people that you attracted into your life during this particular time frame, but they're just dates on the calendar, because it doesn't mean that December 31st is the last day for you to say goodbye to those things that you brought into your life that you don't want to be there. It can happen with every sunrise. Every time you see a light, you get to be reminded of the light of your being. Every time you see another being, whether it be a human being, a cow, or whatever animal that you see, you get to be reminded of the light of your being. You get to be in touch with your intuitive dimension. You get to feel the vibration of someone, and rather than deciding whether or not you like their vibration, you get to decide how your vibration can be lifting to another being. You get to decide to interact with another light and create a more expansive light. You have lights in your home. I imagine some of them you might have chandelier-like things or lights like that that have fans in them, and you may notice that the room is brighter when there are more bulbs that are working in them. You may notice that we shine brighter when we shine together. You may notice that as we move into the winter of our lives, we go through a regenerating process. There is a part of winter where there is more darkness and light, and the light begins to expand, the light begins to multiply in the hidden ways. Beneath the ground, there are new births that are hidden from our sight, and that new birth is being strengthened and fortified and built up by the rain and the snow, and the minerals are coming alive to support the new divine ideas. And we don't see it until the spring of our lives when we start to see beauty that was underneath all the while, that was being nurtured and cared for and prepared for. So we must know that we are moving through a regenerating process now. We are allowing the life flow to increase. We get to release the willfulness of a Herod kind of a consciousness so that love can have its expression. We get to know that there is a gift that we have within us, and it is a gift of love. And it is a gift that we needn't be stingy with. Material things that you were given will always be temporal. They will always fall away, but love is eternal. Love doesn't end simply because you don't see the person anymore. Love doesn't end simply because someone goes on a vacation. Love doesn't end simply if someone walks out of your life. Love doesn't end. But in the moment, what each of us have to give, as Ernest Holmes was telling us in the reading today, what each of us has to give is that love in the moment. And so if we decide that we are not going to gift that, if we decide that we are going to withhold that, then we are not hurting anyone else but ourselves. Because in closing our hearts, we are unable to know our true essence. We are unable to shine. There is a countenance that reflects what is going on inside. And you can pretty much tell when somebody's giving you love, can't you? You can pretty much tell when somebody's giving you an energy that is saying, I appreciate you, an energy that is saying, you are important, you are special, you are unique to me, and you are precious to me. And so you get to understand that even if love doesn't even look that way, that it is still an opportunity for us to be the gift. You don't have to run up your charge cards in order to prove that you love someone. You don't have to try to close the stores on Christmas Eve to express your appreciation. All you have to do is let the light of your being shine through that love intelligence that is so magnificent, so available, so accessible. And it doesn't always come easy. It may take you to go up some high roads and some low roads. It may take you to move through caravans and to be at the threat of violence, but to know, even in the midst of the journey, that love is waiting to be birthed again. This is the gift, because love is always waiting to be birthed again. This story that started out with the angels announcing the birth, the shepherds and the wise men, and following the star that stood still, All of this is part of a culture of Christianity. But it didn't start when Jesus died. There were people who were having conversations in their homes about the teachings of Jesus. There were generations later before people started gathering in public places to celebrate the life of Jesus. You know how it goes when you start telling the story. By the time it gets to the 10th person, it's a whole different story. But know that the story of your life is, was, and always will be love. And it doesn't matter if you identify yourself as Christian. Many of us call religious science applied Christianity. Some of the people in our teaching refuse to associate themselves with Christianity because of all the abuse that people have experienced through religion. But there's still a billion people that are calling themselves Christian. And it doesn't matter whether or not they're proving to be like the man that walked the earth called Jesus. What matters is that each one of us has the capacity to birth a new Christ awareness. What matters is that each one of us has an opportunity to be that kind of consciousness that knows our oneness with God and our oneness with each other. That's why this divine idea of the Oneness Spiritual Center came to be. For no other reason of importance. It is that which is seeking to be birthed in you. Because you found your way to this vibration of oneness. It is for you to determine where you're going to take this Christ divine idea with you for the rest of your journey. As you move to whatever home you may have, as you move to whatever relationship you may have, you have decided to leave any kind of dis-ease alone. Through your affirmations, you decided to leave the misery alone. Through your affirmations, you decided to leave your limited thinking alone. And you decided to birth something new. I support you in this. I absolutely know that you are able, because I know the Christ that lives in each one of us. I celebrate it even now. Namaste.
Namaste.